Welcome back to Cal Fire Relief Marathon 2018. Up next, we have Castlevania, Lords of Shadow, run by Turbodog702. I will be your host on this morning. What a horrible morning to have a curse. I am Alec K47. Turbodog, take it away.
Hello, I'm Turbodog702. This is Castlevania Lords of Shadow 1. I have a meat whip right now. Don't worry about that though. That's just the least of the glitchy stuff that's probably going to be happening in this game. This game is either an okay game, if you're a person like me, or much maligned by other people, but the speedrun is actually filled with tons and tons and tons of stuff that I really enjoy in speedrunning, including a ton of sequence breaking, a lot of glitches, a lot of out of bounds, a lot of skips. If you're at all familiar with the God of War games, this is going to look kind of similar to those as far as like sequence breaking and stuff, which is apt since they're often compared to that. Just to let you guys know, we are doing the full power category, which in the full power category uses a in-game cheat called all upgrades. What this allows me to do is it gives me full resources at the beginning of every level and on any restart from checkpoint. What this allows me to do is do a much larger variety of skips without having to worry about budgeting resources or farming resources. And in general, it's just a more stable run.
I have been informed, if you have a moment, that your splits are currently visible on screen.
I see. Thank you, OBS. For not doing the thing I told you to. Thank you very much. We are taking care of that right now. Alright, so now that I have fully woken up and done something stupid, let's go ahead and get this started. So we're going to be starting up here. I'll give you on go. Are we ready to start?
Yet hope remains in the hearts of the people. We go about our daily
We are
lives
indeed.
never knowing the
It's going to be 3, 2, 1, go. So, we're going to start the first stage. This is a simple arena tutorial thing. We're using silver daggers here. The main thing to know about sub-weapons is sub-weapons are more of a rock, paper, scissors thing than they are traditional sub-weapons in a Castlevania game. I'm using a dark crystal during a cutscene in order to have it go off just after I finish this. That allows for the fastest completion at this stage. After this, I'm going to be using a QTE in order to defeat the large warg here. Whenever I don't skip a cutscene, it's because many of the cutscenes either have a QTE or something associated with them that makes it impossible for me to skip them. But I will skip what I can. Talk more about sub-weapons in just a moment. So that's stage 1.
I follow him into the old forest, watching him from...
Stage 2, we're going to be riding on a horse here. We're going to be purposely failing QTEs here in order to get into arenas quicker. Even if I was to do them successfully, I would still fall into the arena, so by falling off, it's quicker. So as I was saying, each enemy has various weaknesses and resistances associated with them. The reason I'm using silver daggers is because lichens are weak to silver daggers. The lesser lichens that I'm currently fighting die in a single hit to them. So because of that, we will be using those generously. This is the Whirlybird attack, also known as Ultimate Light. It's really strong. For a variety of reasons. But we'll be talking about more in a little bit. Deadbog is going to be the first level in which we're doing quite a bit more unintended strats. I should note also that Full Power utilizes New Game Plus. The difference with New Game Plus is it allows me to keep all of my relics and power-ups throughout the early portion of the game. This is backwards long jumping and backwards high jumping. The reason that I'm doing these is to bypass arena triggers that would pull me into an arena with some goblins. And we're going to be continuing on through the dead bog. It's really hard to understate just how much of this game we are skipping at any given time. There is just a ton of content that we don't need to accomplish simply because of how abusive the high jump mechanics are inside of this game. Speaking of high jumps, this is the ultimate Shadow super jump. And it's a good thing we landed in bounds there. Sometimes it's very easy to land out of bounds using some of these jumps. And by out of bounds, I mean out of bounds in a way that is not constructive to the speedrun. A lot of times, if you jump out of bounds in a poor way, it is very easy to find yourself falling into an infinite void, or just fall into a place that's unrecoverable that you can't really do anything with. So this is the Swamp Troll boss. Everybody say hi to Shrek. Wow. You played really well there. It's okay though. We're just gonna respect the friendship and just leave him there. Gabbo Belmont is the best Belmont because he's a huge coward and decides to run away from everything. So we're currently out of bounds right now. That skips over a lot of climbing, platforming. Whenever you can avoid climbing platforming in this game, it's ultimately a pretty large win because any climbing animation that Gabriel does takes about a second. And sometimes you're doing anywhere between 5 and 20 climbing animations.
The stench of the bog fades into memory.
Pan's Temple's a pretty quick pretty quick puzzle level. I do apologize, I just woke up not too long ago. But we're going to wake up more and more as the game goes on, I think. So normally you'd be going around this level collecting ruins and glyphs that you would use in order to lock or unlock a door. However, the runes and glyphs do not change, and since we know the pattern, we can just continue on as normal. You're noticing that I'm doing a sprint and then jumping at the end of it. The sprint is the fastest basic form of movement that we have inside of this game. However, it only activates for about 7 steps. And because of that, we jump at the end of it. Jumping seems to preserve momentum perfectly, and it allows us to buffer an additional dash as we're in air. So, because it often gets mentioned, well, first I'll do this. This next puzzle is a basic survival horror puzzle. I call it the ring puzzle. You'll see it in a lot of games of this type. The way the ring puzzle works is as you move one ring one direction, the adjacent ring moves the opposite direction, and you need to line them up in some way. In this case, making a bridge to the spirit of your dead wife, Marie. I'm not going to talk too much about the storyline, because there's a lot to cover inside of this game as far as speed tech, but I'll touch where I can here and there. Speaking of the 8-bit sprite on the left side of the screen, that 8-bit sprite is specifically there to let people know that you're a huge cheater and are using in-game cheats. It does have a slight advantage with it, though, in that you can see what Gabriel's state is at any given time. When you attack, the small 8-bit sprite attacks. When you're jumping, it jumps, things of that nature. This can be useful when you're learning the game, as it will let you know what state your character is in when you can't necessarily see them. This is a Titan. Titans are the so-called Shadow of the Colossus ripoffs that people talk about. However, these bosses, you can actually force their cycles, and the platforming on them works all the time, which I can't really say about the Shadow of the Colossus bosses, so yeah. Right now, we just need to find an avenue in order to get on the Colossus. And in order to do that, he needs to punch the ground twice. Once we get on top of them, we used a sub-weapon called the Dark Crystal. You might have saw it on the first stage, where we used it to defeat the Warg rather quickly. In this one, we use it in order to weaken the ruins on it, that serve as weak points to the Titan. Normally you would have to hit a rune 10 times in order to break it. However, when you use a Dark Crystal, you only have to hit it once. Considerably faster. This is already a divergent path from New Game Plus without full power. In New Game Plus, your Dark Crystals are extremely precious, and you would never use them on something like this or the first stage boss. A lot harder to get a hold of. Other than that, the Titans are a fair amount of luck, or RNG, in that the amount of times that they shake is not really in your control. They will always shake a preset amount of times, depending on what body part you're on, but the frequency of their shakes is not in your control. That's going to do it for Chapter 1. Moving into Chapter 2, we're going to have Enchanted Forest. A little bit of climbing skips here at the beginning. I'm going to roll off this cliff, because that avoids invisible wall detection. Normally you need to platform down that, but by doing that little skip, we avoid that. By double jumping into that cutscene, we land further into it. Saves a little bit of time in the long run. So I mentioned not being able to see Gabriel. As you'll see more and more, we will be going out of bounds quite extensively in this run. And the vast majority of times when you go out of bounds, you are not going to be able to see your character model. And because of that, it is extremely important that a runner has a very intimate knowledge of the geometry of the level around them memorized. Because a lot of times you won't see the geometry, or it will be geometry that's put on things that do not have a visual representation of them. So right now we're getting on top of this wall. Ooh, this is an interesting one. Okay. Still worked. So we're out of bounds currently behind the wall. The reason we are doing this is to bypass that gate that was glowing. Normally you would need to fight a bunch of goblins and use grenades in order to deal with them. So very important that I rolled there at the end of that jump. If I didn't, Gabriel, after a large fall, tends to roll in the direction he's facing. And since I'm jumping backwards, he would have rolled off the cliff there. But you can correct that yourself.
He is becoming stronger with every step he takes.
So this game is constantly throwing new things at me, despite the fact that I've been running it pretty extensively over the past year, and considerably more before that as well. For example, when I kind of landed on top of the building, but then landed back in the screen out of bounds, that was something I hadn't encountered before. But again, because I have a pretty strong knowledge of the game's geometry, I was able to make an adjustment that made it so that I was still able to do the skip correctly. I'm pretty proud of this next climbing skip. There used to be a way less consistent strategy, but I developed a different one that allows me to get onto that platform a lot easier. Normally I was averaging about a 1 in 3 chance of making a similar jump. That one loses a tiny bit of time, but is way more consistent. We're going to pick up this key right here. That door in the background, we're supposed to get 2 runic keys in order to open it. However, with a precision out-of-bounds jump here, we are going to be able to bypass that. Okay. So that one's kind of rough because sometimes you can be rolled off the cliff there. And depending on what camera angle you get, sometimes you can't really do a lot about it. The jumping here is important because there's a lot of invisible slopes that will lead you to infinite void pits. But we made a pretty good jump there. I'm gonna saw down this. If you do happen to catch, by the way, any questions that seem pretty interesting or pretty ubiquitous in the chat, feel free to let me know. My focus is kind of heavily put into this game whenever I need to run it.
Thus far, I see 2. First, are you using any DLC in this run?
Alright, the DLC for Lords of Shadow 1... Okay, that was bad luck. Anyway, the DLC for Lords of Shadow 1 is 2 chapters. The DLC chapters are not necessary to do inside of the speedrun. This is basically the worst that could have happened, but we're gonna deal with it, I guess. Alright. So normally, 3 Shadow or Ultimate Shadow charges is supposed to put these boars in a grabbable state. However, I was getting a damage glitch where sometimes you get double damage on, or double hits, I should say, on Ultimate Shadow, and that was killing the boars instead of allowing me to mount them. I'm really glad the game didn't crash there. One of the few places that this game can kind of uncommonly crash is when you're dismounting boars. Anyway, back to what you were talking about. So DLC is 2 DLC chapters. We will not be doing them in this run because they are not necessary for the base game. Also, they're not particularly fun to speedrun, and they're not particularly fun to play casually. So, yeah. Not going to be doing those. Sorry, folks. But as far as...
more importantly, we do have another question. Does this game feature any wall chicken?
No wall chicken.
What a disgrace.
Only a meat whip.
However, we do have an $18 donation from Ari with no comment, so thank you very much for that.
Is this game buggy or glitchy in a casual play? It's a fair question. Not really, to be honest. The game's actually structured maybe a little bit too safely, I would say, for that. I'll cover that a little bit more in a moment. This is Waterfalls Vicarta. I'm going to jump on top of this statue, and then a little bit on the invisible collision above the statue. That's going to give me enough height to get on top of this invisible wall. So because I got that camera angle change, I need to restart from checkpoint. Otherwise it zips me into an arena, even though I was clearly out of bounds. Okay. That was interesting, to say the least. Should note that I'm currently playing on an Xbox One controller. My PS4 controller that I normally run this game on broke pretty recently. So because of that, it's going to be a little bit challenging to do a couple of these, but should be okay. Okay, step 1's done. Now step 2, getting in the background. Alright, step 2 completed. So what's really difficult about that is, as I mentioned, you can get sucked into an arena if your jump isn't perfect there. You're basically trying to preserve your jump on top of the invisible wall so that you can jump as you're falling and land on a very small piece of geometry that will allow you to continue on. We're going to be doing a couple of precision jumps here in order to grab a grapple point in the background that you normally have to go around this large structure in the background to get to. Okay. There we go. And one more jump here at the end. And then we're going to do one more jump in order to skip a werewolf arena. Okay. So this is a thing that can happen. Sometimes you can't really get on top of the invisible wall there. Because of that, I'm going to take the safe approach here, which is to just do the skip somewhat normally. Normally you're supposed to use that spider to spin a web and then bypass it with a web bridge. But you can skip over that just like that. The method that I was using saves about 2 seconds. Or that I was attempting, I should say. But it doesn't save any time if you don't get it, so unfortunate. Okay. There we go. So as you can see, grapple points aren't active until you reach certain camera angles or certain heights. It's one of the key problems with them. Returning to the question about the game being buggy in casual play, as I mentioned, not really. A lot of the times invisible walls are really aggressively placed and collision is put in a really difficult position to deal with. So you really have to try kind of hard in order to break this game open. This is a Carta. The game proclaims that it is impossible to climb up here and that I'd better find an alternate way. But, I mean, the game's wrong. Because, I mean, we climbed up that pretty easily. We need to make a precision jump here. There's a huge invisible wall in the middle of this pit that we need to go under and then up over to hit the trigger point.
This strange girl? Surely she could...
Very proud of this stage. A lot of climbing skips implemented here. A lot of skipping of platforming in general in this stage. Kind of hard to appreciate if you've never played the game normally, but just take my word for it. There's a lot of things in here that you're supposed to climb all over and backwards on. And by making these jumps, we're avoiding that. We're also dropping off of our rappel points rather than climbing down them in order to reduce the time we're spending doing that style of platforming as well. You're supposed to grab 2 runic ruins and then use them to build a bridge over this gap. But once we get on top of the invisible wall here, it's not really an issue. So we can just jump over the gap. You just jump over it. So again, a little climbing, skipping here as we do this backwards jump in order to grab that grapple point. So we have a little bit of a timed arena here, so if there's anything else to cover as far as games inside of the marathon or the marathon's plans or goals in general, feel free to cover that.
But of course, we did receive a $2.22 donation from Dragon7398. Well, winking face. Also, I would like to mention that coming up after New Super Luigi U, we have a bid war for Fire Emblem Fates. The game features 3 storylines, and you, with your donations, get to choose which one will be played. Additionally, later on in the evening, we have a Mega Man 1 glitchless or Mega Man 2 normal zipless bid war, which you will also be able to donate to.
Alright. Side note, I'd like to mention that after Castlevania Lords of Shadow, we're going to have DB playing Castlevania Aria of Sorrow, so feel free to check that out. Very, very good run, very, very good runner of that game. Should be a pretty sweet watch. I might actually stay up a little bit just to watch that. So it's going to be the second Titan of the run. Once again, using the Dark Crystal in order to put each of the ruins in a single hit kill state. First, we're going to have to do a little bit of controller spinning here in order to throw a rock back.
Now is your chance! Climb up!
So once again, we're kind of at the game's mercy as far as being able to avoid shakes here. You'll notice sometimes I'm kind of jumping across as I'm doing this platforming. This is a faster form of movement than just doing the slow crawl. However, sometimes it doesn't activate. There's a number of reasons why this can be. Sometimes it can be a slight input error. Sometimes it has to do with how the game kind of grids out your platforming on these sections. Not too big of an issue, though. But as I mentioned, reducing the amount of time you're climbing is always a premium investment. I do a little bit of hold on. Always remember to hold RT to grip. Especially true on the Titans. I mean, please, if you remember nothing, never fall off the Titans in this game. Because if you fall off, then you have to climb up everything pretty much all over again. You don't need to break the ruins, but still pretty brutal.
The grip.
You need to get a grip, if you will. So we're going to have a QTE coming up here. As I mentioned, pretty important that I don't botch this. However, I wouldn't put myself out of the realm of botching it. Stranger things have happened with this game.
Gabriel, take this.
So one of the nice things about that style of cutscene is you can press pretty much any action button as the circles close in on one another, and it'll activate the QTE. So it's not really as important to pick a specific button, just the timing, which I think is a good step in the right direction. Lords of Shadow 2 would follow up on this by then allowing you to remove QTEs, which is the even better option. But Lords of Shadow didn't quite make the cut on that decision, I guess. So this is the Black Knight. This is normally where you're supposed to get the gauntlet that I've been using in order to do high jumps. But again, New Game Plus, don't need to worry about it. It's important that we turn off our magic as we do our grabs on this guy. The reason for that is you cannot get him to drop magic orbs that you can absorb if you have magic activated. As you can see, combat, not so much the real draw of this run as much as it is the crazy glitching, sequence breaking, movement tech, out of bounds, things like that. So unfortunately, doesn't look like we got any good drops, which is not great, but we'll deal with it. Not that much of a time loss.
Dreams are a
So,
gateway
3
to
towers.
the
3
mind,
towers is
and now
kind of
they-
an odd level, in that even in New Game, there's some pretty abusive stuff you can do in order to skip the level. At the end of this level, there is a door that you require 3 fairy sub-weapons in order to unlock. And you're supposed to acquire the fairy sub-weapon in this stage, but you start with 0. Since we're in New Game Plus, it's not so much of a problem because we're going to always have 3 fairies to feed to the door, if you will. But even in New Game, there's going to be a ledge right over here on the upper part that you can reach even at the time in New Game. That ledge has a chest on it with a fairy upgrade. If you're able to get that fairy upgrade, then when you gain access to the fairies in the next arena, you start with maxed out on them. So you immediately get the 3 fairies that you need in order to skip the door. We're going to have another arena skip coming up here, jumping over a huge door. This is an investment of between 3 and 4 holy waters. Investment of holy waters isn't such a big deal inside of full power runs. It's more of an issue when you are talking about New Game Plus. The reason for that is you can only have 10 holy water, and holy water drops are not guaranteed. They are quite finite. So because of that, you need to budget your holy water and farm holy water in that particular category, which is why it isn't nearly as consistent or marathon safe as this one. It's the door that we needed. So we're going to come up to our first Lord of Shadow, Cornell, the Dark Lord of the Lycans. But we're good pals with Cornell. And we realize that we really don't need his Cyclone boots, because we have a pair. So, I'm just gonna let him be. So, he can just hang out there. Maybe he'll calm down after a while. Instead, we're just gonna ride an eagle to the next level.
The deed is done. Cornell is no more.
This is the Mountain Fortress. We're going to be doing a pretty abusive skip for this. But first, we're going to be doing a slight sky climbing skip at the beginning of this level. This avoids having to climb up and down the cliffside that is right next to us here. That jump is kind of difficult at times, but there are a number of ways that you can salvage it if things go wrong. So now we're going to be doing probably one of the hardest skips in the game to learn casually. The Waterfalls of Igarta skip that I had to do a restart on is definitely one of the hard ones as well. This one can be a real problem because of a number of issues with jumps that lead to infinite falls. This initial jump in particular is kind of difficult to get a hang of. But I think I have a pretty good strategy for it personally. Okay, we got the camera change. There is times where you can jump over to this platform but not get the camera change. Right now I'm currently under the level. In addition to skipping the Ogre boss, we're also skipping a Chupacabra. Chupacabras are puzzle platforming sections. The game takes away your relics, and you are forced to chase the Chupacabra around in order to get them back. This jump at the end here has been kind of sketchy for me the last little bit, but we got it okay. I've been having trouble with that jump recently, so kind of glad that it worked out.
The witch who guards this fortress.
But yeah, a lot of precision jumps there. I'd like to give a shout out to Findlestick, Satvara, Akion, and Vipia Zone, who are the main glitch hunters for this game, in particular Findlestick. A lot of the strategies that you're seeing implemented here and strategies are a result of his hard work. I have basically only made a scant few improvements, mainly in the realm of reducing resources needed in order to do certain skips. But the basics of the skips and the tech they're in is a result of all those people's hard work. Another shout out to Lestat Vampire, who is the only other RTA runner that I'm aware of for this game. He's a French runner who is... I don't think he's ever coming back to this game, but he has a really decent time in it as well. We are jumping high there in order to bypass an arena with a bunch of wraiths. And we're going to be moving on to the Crow Witch Malphus soon enough. Going to be doing a little bit of climbing skip. We do a normal jump here, because by doing a normal jump, we preserve our double jump for further up this climbing section. That allows us to bypass way more climbing than using our double jump earlier on. This is an example of one of those improvements I was talking about from the Findlestick route. So we're going to attempt to do the omelet strat, as I call it. The basic of this is you're supposed to throw back the eggs that Malphus shoots at you, back at her. We want to try to get 2 or 3 thrown back at her, if possible. Ah, didn't get it. Alright. That's fine. Just basically turns this into a 3-cycle fight instead of a 2-cycle fight. The reason why that's particularly inconsistent is that that slowdown that occurs after I throw the first egg locks your inputs in a certain way, and because of that, it can be difficult to get the egg toss that you need. The second egg toss is the hardest one to get. Now, you might be raving about these glitches that I'm doing and calling foul play on it. I mean, maybe I'm robbing this game blind right now.
Those puns were simply rotten.
Alright, so we need to clear this smaller enemy here in order to allow it to throw more eggs. You guys are wondering kind of how optimized this run is. Recently I started implementing some newer strats that had just kind of came to light. They can save potentially about 4 minutes on the run, but besides those new strats that had just emerged, this run's pretty much as optimized RTA as I feel this run can kind of get. There's a lot of inconsistent things even when you have a firm grasp of understanding of this game. Just certain jump momentums, certain interactions with sloped geometry that you can't really account for, and that you can't do consistently in an RTA sense. That being said, I've been working on individual level runs for each of the levels inside of this game. Speaking of Fiddlestick once again, he himself has a collection of IL runs, 2 of them in fact. One using older strats, one using the newer ones that are fantastic. Definitely recommend, if this looks interesting to you, to check those out on his YouTube channel. But that's why I'm so excited when I see things like climbing skips. So you're like, oh, it only saves 3 seconds. What is that? Well, it's 3 seconds that I didn't have on the run before. Speaking of these kind of new strats, I'm going to try one of those here. We're going to give it a couple attempts. And if we don't get it, we will move on. Okay, so we got... didn't quite get on the branch. So the first part is getting on top of this branch with a guillotine move. Okay. Alright. So we didn't get it that time. We're going to go ahead and restart from checkpoint. We're going to give this one more attempt. If we don't get it, then we're just going to go ahead and do the normal strat for this. So, it was only recently that an infinite jump was discovered for this game. And the infinite jump does have a fair amount of application, but it does have some restrictions on it. Namely that you have to get into a glitched standing state in order for it to work. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We get it? Yes, we got it. Okay, so if you notice the last time I was in here, I hit a cutscene. That cutscene is a Chupacabra that steals your relics, as mentioned before. You then have to chase him around the level, deal with an arena that you can't bypass, and then basically get to him and get your relics back before you can proceed. That skip saves somewhere in the realm of about 2 minutes. So even though I had to do a restart, it still did save time overall, which is why I did it. Weigal Village is a pretty slam dunk level as well. As you can see, there's a variety of levels that take about 6 to 12 minutes to do casually that we just slam dunk all over, like this one, in less than a minute.
Come on and slam, and welcome to the jam.
Another run
We
that
delve
definitely you
deep
guys should have caught.
ready to face.
Good old Ghost King. Alright, we're going to try the segmented strat here at first.
Careful, Gabriel. This is not going to be so easy.
You always want to go for the segmented strat first.
Ready, dead meat.
Dang. Alright, so we slid against a wall there that kicked us back inbounds, but that's fine. Please? Okay. Alright, we're fine. So we bypassed the door that you would normally need to crank open, and then we bypassed the door that you would need to fetch 2 ruins out of trapdoors in order to get to. So even though we didn't get the optimized strat, we still got a strat that's pretty strong.
There must be some way. The traps laid by the
So Abbey Library is probably my favorite stage in the game. The reason for that is you get a good look into how the game is somewhat constructed. If you know anything about game design, this should look pretty interesting to you. Okay. So we're currently out of bounds behind the level, and we're going to do a glitch charge into a high jump here. Hopefully it works. This is not great. Where are we? We're out there. Okay. So we actually got the thing that you don't want to happen in this stage, but you normally do want to happen, which is kind of funny. So normally we were trying to do a strat in order to bypass doing this puzzle for the door. Since we had to do a restart, it's better to usually just do the puzzle here. So what happens there is that shadow charge that I was doing off the cliff is one of the inconsistencies I was talking about. The amount of distance that you go off of the ledge with it is, I won't say random, but inconsistent. And what happened there is I actually got about 4 times as much distance as I wanted. And as a result of that, I kind of just bypassed everything that I was trying to jump to. I tried to recover it, but unfortunately, even with a structured jump, I had still gone too far. Luckily, because of how that is set up, when you restart, you start immediately in the puzzle room, and that puzzle's considerably easy to deal with. Right here, we're going to jump over this bridge, or attempt to. We release light fairies, which act as homing bombs to deal with the imps there as we make that high jump. We're going to jump on top of this cliff and then restart from checkpoint. The reason for that is by restarting from checkpoint here, we despawn the imps that would be chasing us here. Normally, in order to get to that slope without double jump, you would need to open up a crank door, and at that point, the game is assuming that you've already cleared out the imps.
Impressive trick, good sir.
So you want to talk a little bit about the Cal Fire Marathon and who we're benefiting with this cause a little bit?
Of course. This year we are benefiting the California Fire Foundation, a non-profit organization that works to provide emotional and financial assistance to the families of fallen firefighters, active firefighters, and their communities. They have short-term aid programs, supplying aid to the victims of emergency, or SAVE, for example. They put on a memorial service every year in Sacramento, California, for those unfortunate firefighters that lost their lives in the line of duty. Additionally, September is Firefighter Appreciation Month. To help show your own appreciation, you may tweet with the hashtag FFAppreciationMonth or hashtag ThankAFirefighter.
The power to defeat the vampires is
Thank you
now
very
in our
much.
hands.
Alright, so now we're going to have Bronner. Those of you familiar with Bronner from Portrait of Ruin, he's been maybe hitting the juice a little bit. But we'll get to see this game's interpretation of Bronner soon enough. So vampires are extremely weak to holy water. In 1 holy water, they become in a throw killable state. In 2 holy waters, they are killed. This is Bronner. So he went from artist out of World War I to juiced up vampire boy. We will see a similar change when it comes to Olrox, another Castlevania alumni. I'd say one of the, oh, we get to see this sweet little QTE grab here. I'll do it for funsies. So, one of the unfortunate casualties of this speedrun is the fact that you don't get to see some of the sweet boss kills inside of it, but we're trying to go fast. I suppose I should also say that I'm playing on the Ultimate Edition of this game that's available on Steam. PC version is faster than console by a fair amount, but there are a couple of strategies that we cannot do on the PC version. I'll mention them as we come to them, but in general, pretty easy to do everything that you want to do. And we do almost every skip in the game. Only one particularly abusive skip isn't part of it. Which is unfortunate, but we deal with it. And you get to see some, or sorry, not see. You don't see music. You get to listen to sweet music in that stage, so deal with that as we can. We jump over.
Of course, you are one of those people with synesthesia.
I see. I guess that's fair. So, we jump over the gate in order to initiate a checkpoint here, in case we miss the jump thereafter. There we go. So by hitting that camera angle, we can now restart from checkpoint, which gives us back our double jump, and we can jump out of that pit before we land in it. We're now going to get into some sweet cranking minigames here. We're going to release fairies as we're cranking. Fairies, super underestimated sub-weapon inside of this game, especially with people during their casual plays. Fairies act as distractions, and they can distract a lot of the more problematic enemies of the game and allow you to just wail on them with impunity. They also allow you to do things like what I just did, where I distracted the skeletons using the fairies and used that distraction to open up the crank that they would normally prevent me from accessing. But if you need some casual tips, learn your weaknesses of enemies, and if you run into an enemy that seems to be giving you problems, even larger normal enemies, then feel free to use fairies on them, because it probably is going to work. This is a pretty precise jump as well. Once again, using a statue and the invisible collision above it in order to get some extra height in order to make that jump possible. You're also noticing that I'm using a stomp move for certain situations like that. That's because the stomp move will typically put you in a grounded state, even if you're on a piece of geometry that would normally kind of not allow that. So after we pick up the key, we need to restart from checkpoint, because currently that invisible wall is still active. By restarting from checkpoint, we get rid of it, and we even get a sweet little spider bridge here. Nothing screams Castlevania like balance beams. So we're going to be taming a spooter here. Secretly being paid off by Marvel to advertise Spoderman. I suppose it's not really a secret anymore, right? Since I mentioned it, but So now we're going to make our way into the Vampire's Castle. Later on in the Lords of Shadow series, this will become Castlevania, basically. But for now, we need to deal with the Vampire Dark Lord before we can progress with the story.
Time is running out. Night is almost upon
Castle Hall is a pretty punishing level if things go poorly in it. Firstly, we need to deal with these lesser vampires as we do this crank. If one of those fairies doesn't land, he can run over and hit me, and then we're in trouble. Same thing with that set of fairies. If one of those vampires gets away, it can be a pretty significant time loss because we have to restart the level, since we would be out of fairies at this time. This door requires a significant amount of holy water in order to get over it as well. So if you miss that jump, that is also pretty catastrophic, because you've invested so much holy water into it and not made it. This is Refectory, normally a level where you have to go around the stage, defeating ghouls and picking up a key from the Butcher in order to enter the gate that I'm about to bypass right now. These lances make for a nice little platform that we can use to reset our jumps and get out of bounds. Once we hit here, we are going to restart from checkpoint to get ourselves back in bounds on the other side of the door. There is a way to bypass this door, but it's rather inconsistent, and I haven't even really gotten it to work on the PC version, but I'm pretty sure it's possible. That being said, this is pretty much as fast and much more consistent. In general, you really just want to do your best to accomplish skips the first or second attempt, and that's one of the best things that you can hope for. Very important that I release those fairies while in dark magic form or with no magic on, otherwise they become the bombs rather than the distraction that I do want.
The butcher who commanded the castle kitchens.
Yeah, we bypassed the chess puzzle that's over there as well. It's not really chess, it's like a war game. But, yeah. That would be a pretty rough thing to do in the actual game itself, if you had to do it as part of the speed run, just because of the luck factor with that. Funny part about this arena, you can actually just jump out of this, nothing special. Just as long as you know that ledge is there, you can just climb out of it. Normally we're supposed to scale down the side of this building in order to get a key to open up this gate. But instead we're just going to get on the other side of it that way. Very important to make this jump kind of like this. You have a fair amount of leeway in making that jump, but still important to respect it. Otherwise, you need to do a restart from checkpoint, and it puts you considerably far back. Electric Laboratory. We're going to be going for a new strat here. That's still kind of rough to me. So I'm going to try to focus here on this. Okay, step 1's done. Now step 2, don't fall down. Okay, step 2's done. Time for step 3. Oh, that's not great. Yeah. Step 3 fails. Alright. Let's try this again. So the big problem there is when constructing my jump, I hit a piece of geometry that I did not want to hit, which resulted in bad things happening. We're going to give this a couple more tries. So ideally, you would have gotten a better camera angle there during that jump, but it's not always an option. Okay. So that jump's good. Now we need to be very careful as we go around the outside of the stage here. Okay, once we get behind here, we're fairly safe. Very important we skip that cutscene immediately or else we get sucked into a boss arena. So normally you have a bunch of light puzzles in order to get through this stage. However, we're just going to jump through the door over here. Before you saw guillotine being used to try to initiate an infinite jump. This is another property of guillotine where you can kind of stick to geometry. And that allows you to re-guillotine. Now we're going to go ahead and get called out for all this stuff that we've been doing in this run, though.
It's not fair. I never lose. You're a cheat. And you're going to pay.
Oh no! It's the Twin Galaxies mods. They're coming to stop the cheating.
Now, play with my toys.
So very important that we can't use a Dark Crystal to kill these guys, because if you kill them without doing this grab, they will respawn. And so because of that, we also need to hit them in such a way that we do not kill them with Ultimate Shadow, which, if you saw an earlier part where we were trying to mount a boar by bringing it into critical HP, a similar thing can happen with these where you will get a random double hit on these enemies. And if that happens, then you kill them and have to wait for a respawn. Not a huge time loss, but the type of thing that you don't want to see. Last one always summons a puddle if he's able to. And I'm just going to hit this a couple times. The double hit tends to happen more often if you're next to breakable items. So because of that, I forgot a little bit of time from hitting another Ultimate Shadow to just guarantee that I was going to get the grab.
No!
Curious, isn't
Alright,
it?
we're going to be moving
Love
on.
can
Chapter
be
8 is going to be the last chapter where we're going to be inside of Castlevania. Then we're going to move on to deal with the Dark Lord of the Necromancers for the endgame. So, Alec, anything that you're looking forward to as far as runs inside of the marathon for the remainder of it? Or any good runs that you caught that you think people should catch in the VODs?
As for runs that I'm looking forward to, I would of course start with Castlevania Aria of Sorrow, the very next run. It is then followed by a race of New Super Luigi U, which I expect to be quite interesting and very likely close. Following that, we have a few interesting runs as well, if I remember Fates for any RPG fans. Link to the past 100%, you can see the rest on the schedule. And we have quite the finale planned, I assure you. As for good runs that you might wish to look back on, I really enjoyed the Borderlands 2 run. Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse was also quite good. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2X. Several others as well. I would spend too long listing them, to be frank.
This is the Holy Cross Breakout. So normally, you're supposed to have an animation where you bend over to pick up a key off of that guy, and then you're locked into that room. By using the light magic move, Holy Cross, you can do what's called a breakout, which stops the animation from occurring, and you can leave the room as the game's trying to do its scripted event. Breakouts are a common term in this type of 3D action game. As mentioned, they generally refer to getting out of an animation that's supposed to be structured in a way that the game wants you to take the animation for an event to occur, and you are breaking out of that animation. There's other forms of it, but that's the most common one. It's going to be the Clockwork Tower. A lot of platforming skipping inside of this. We're going to go for a couple of special skips inside of this. There is a way in order to skip the last boss of this stage, but it is ridiculously inconsistent and not really in the control of the player. It relies on the boss not crowding the jump point, not doing a particular move where it has projectiles to throw at you, and depends on you getting on a very thin piece of geometry in order to continue to the end of the stage. So a lot of things have to go right for it to work. So because of that, we're just going to fight the boss normally. Doesn't take that much more time. Wow, that was the most perfect I've ever done that. And then I just completely botched that part, but that's okay. Okay, so there's a grab point right there. That's the actual intended path. But sometimes the game just decides that it doesn't want to grab that ledge. I don't know what it is. So both of those jumps that I did bypassed the first floor at the very beginning and bypassed about 50% of the second floor. So we're going to purposely drop this crank so that we can engage Frankenstein's monster as early as we can. Otherwise, he would break our crank animation anyway, so we're just bypassing that and running straight to the boss. It is possible to save a little bit of time by doing something that's quite a bit more consistent, where you lead him around in a circle around the crank. But it doesn't save that much time. And again, just for marathon's sake, edging on consistency is key, as it is with this game in general for RTA. So another common thing that you're seeing here is for character action games or spectacle action games, whatever you want to call this style of game, is that whenever you can gain about 2 to 3 times the distance or height that the developers intended for you to get at any given time, the game kind of breaks wide open, and you can start accessing geometry that you shouldn't be able to, or triggers. So the main goal of any game like this is to either find an infinite jump or to gain extra height or distance on your jumps, and then everything kind of falls into place afterward. This is Olrox. You remember Olrox from Symphony of the Night? He as well has been hitting the juice. The Olrox skip is one of the hardest skips inside of the game, and has taken me a very long time to train. Hopefully this works out just fine. Okay, we need to get a restand right here on a piece of geometry. That's going to give us back our double jump. That's important for making this jump. Yes, alright. So the collision there for the end of level trigger is very, very thin. The reason why that skip is so difficult is getting on that initial chain is a very thin piece of geometry, and then you have to make a very precise jump backwards over the door that is blocking your path. Another problem with that, besides the precision required in order to do that jump, is the fact that Olrox can change your camera angle by running around underneath you, or by doing certain actions. He also has a move where he throws his swords, and that sword throw has seemingly infinite range. I have been easily 3 jump heights above the stage, and he's thrown his swords and hit me. So if he decides to do that, you just have to kind of abandon your jump entirely. As you saw also, it is pretty expensive on holy water. You can expect that skip to run you about 4 to 5 holy waters, depending on how well your initial jump goes. This is Carmilla, the Dark Lord of the Lampires. A little bit of poor luck in that she immediately did her Bat Swarm there, but that's okay. We still cornered her with Ultimate Light. So Ultimate Shadow typically does more damage per hit than Ultimate Light, but Ultimate Light hits so much faster if you can corner an enemy that it is actually the fastest DPS. So now we're going to have some critical QTEs to hit. Don't botch this one either. I mentioned don't botch the Titans. This is another one, because if you mess up at the end of this, that's like 2 minutes. So let's not do that, shall we? I can easily say that, so I feel like a lot of people know me from my work with Symphony of the Night and from Parasite Eve and Guacamelee. I can easily say that Lords of Shadow is the hardest game that I've had to learn. And the reason for that is, while Acheon and Fiddlestick did an admirable job of archiving what was possible for speedrunning and doing glitches, the documentation of what you were trying to accomplish or how it was done was not great. Because of that, a lot of the times I had to backwards engineer the footage that I was seeing from Fiddlestick's individual level runs by just looking at them constantly and listening, because, as I mentioned, a lot of the skips you can't even see what's happening. So you just kind of got to listen for if he's double jumping, is he trying to do an avalanche punch or a landslide punch? Is he doing melee attacks? You know, and just trying to backwards engineer everything from there. That being said, ever since backwards long jumping was discovered, this game's RTA speedrun has become vastly easier, and honestly I credit the discovery of it with this game being RTA viable at all. With the older strats before it, you could do a run, but everything was just brutal. It was brutal to do runs with the amount of precision that you needed for jumps, and with inconsistency in the jumps themselves. Still, even though I have spent like dozens of hours on certain skips, it's still been one of the most rewarding games for me to run. Just because every time that I'm able to remove a holy water out of a jump, or every time that I'm able to find a new way to do a skip that's more consistent, even if it's like a second or two slower, just the consistency of it improving, it's been really rewarding. And I'd like to think that's something that draws a lot of people to their speed games, is that feeling of accomplishment when either you discover something or when you execute something well. So we're going to be breaking a Dark Crystal here in order to create a checkpoint that we can return to if we mess up the next skip. This is the the second to last Chupacabra skip in the game. You get 2 restarts before it starts losing you time, so that's why we really want to make the restart point here. Shoutouts to all the communities I mentioned, by the way, as far as Symphony of the Night and Castlevania in general, Guacamelee, and Parasite Eve. A lot of people taking some of the groundwork that I put down in those games and really running with it, and then Guacamelee for just fantastic community in general. Even though I didn't really find too much in that one. Been a very welcoming group of people. So we preserve our double jump there to skip that climbing section. That saves about 7 seconds. We actually got the Chupacabra skip first time as well. I found some more consistent ways of doing that, which has been nice as well. And we're going to be moving on to Woesmore here. Woesmore is probably my second favorite level in the game, once again because it really shows you some insight into the game design of the level. For Woesmore, you're tasked by Baba Yaga, the Witch of Folklore, to find 3 keys to open up a magical music box and fetch her the blue rose, which will give her youth. So we're going to go ahead and jump out of bounds here. And this is what I mean. So we can get underneath the level, and underneath the level, the keys actually exist. Normally, you are supposed to fight... You're supposed to use crows in order to do a type of circuit puzzle, I would call it. Where you use them to activate scarecrows. And once you activate those scarecrows, you fight them. And once you defeat them, then you get access to the keys. But the keys actually exist underneath the level even without fighting the scarecrows. And then they just kind of come up through the ground. Shoutouts to Fiddlestick for finding this cutscene skip. So normally you have to watch a cutscene of the crows flying onto a banister, and that's supposed to introduce the crow puzzle to you.
The old hag
Once it introduces the crow puzzle to you, then you can kind of move around freely, but you can't skip that cutscene, and that cutscene's about 12 seconds, I believe. I used an extra holy water there, which probably cost me about 1.5 seconds, but I wanted to make sure I got it. Again, for some of these, I'm using slightly modified strats just for consistency's sake. This is the music box. A lot of puzzle platforming here. What you need to do is associate each of these cylinders I'm picking up with a trap. For example, red is these platforms. Green is the spike trap that blocks off tunnels. Couple notes about Music Box. Music Box has a full level skip in the console version of it, where you can jump out of bounds, get on top of the level, and then reach the blue rose from there with some precise jumps. I have been unable at this point to confirm the presence of the Music Box skip in PC. I've put in a fair amount of attempts at it, but I just have not gotten it to work yet. That being said, I was never really great at the skip in the console version either. I've really wanted Fiddlestick, who is a fantastic player of this game, to take a look at it. But for one reason or another, he's not really looked at the PC version extensively to look for other changes. Some other minor changes involve things with the infinite jump. It does appear that the infinite jump works less consistently on PC, I would say. But it's really hard to tell just based on watching his ILs. And I've only kind of talked to him briefly here and there. I don't expect this to change much in the future either, because unfortunately it seems like Fiddlestick has decided to move on to greener pastures. Continue glitching with other games. But I wish him the best of luck with those endeavors, because a really talented guy for finding skips and alternative solutions to skips. Also started up a Twitch account, which I've only seen him do one stream so far, but really looking forward to seeing what he's going to be doing with that. If you got a quick donation to throw out, feel free.
Unfortunately, we have not received any in this past few minutes, but I would like to remind you all that we are benefiting the California Fire Foundation, a non-profit organization that provides emotional and financial support to firefighters, those firefighters who fell in the line of duty, and the communities affected by the fires. So, I assure you that any money you choose to donate would go to a good cause. Additionally, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that we have a couple choices for you coming up. there are bid wars for which storyline is played in Fire Emblem Fates coming up shortly. Currently, Revelations is winning $50 to 10 over Conquest, with Birthright not receiving any support, really. Also, later, Mega Man Glitchless is winning over Mega Man 2 normal zipless by all of 22 cents. So, if you would like to affect either of those choices, get your donations in.
Who's going to be doing the run for the Mega Man 1 versus Mega Man 2? I did not catch that.
That is going to be Stuffin' Things.
Gotcha. Alright, so a little bit of an arena skip here. Normally we're supposed to fight this guy and get a ruin to move this arm across the gap in the background. We're going to try to avoid doing that, though. Alright, nice. We got on top of the invisible arm bridge. For some reason, that jump is kind of inconsistent for getting on that invisible platform. I haven't really cracked what the cause of the inconsistency is. It seems to be related with just how tall the invisible walls are around it, but still trying to figure stuff out. We break these rocks on purpose in order to make it so that our landslide punch doesn't aim at them. Landslide punch is this slam down fist that you're seeing me do right there to get into the shoulder. So by getting that camera angle change at the end there, we spawn the end of level trigger, and we're able to move on to the final part of the stage and complete it. We're now going to fight Pan, who steals our relics in order to teach us about parrying. He didn't steal our Dark Crystal, though, which seems ill-advised, as we're going to complete most of the first phase and get back our light magic relatively quickly thereafter. Guess that's egg on his face. But parrying here is the fastest form of DPS in order to deal with his attacks. Parrying seems very much intended as well, as his attacks seem to have an unusually large parry window. Now that we have light magic, we are going to continue to parry attack, but if he ever drops his light magic, we are going to brutalize him with infinite light, or ultimate light, I should say. Like this. Let's just give this old gob some fisticuffs. Goatman about to get punched. So this is trying to show you the mechanics of using opposing magic to fight bosses that have magic. This is really only used in the final boss of the game, but basically you need to be charged with shadow magic to defeat light magic, and light magic to defeat shadow magic. Otherwise you will not deal damage. Hardest QTE left in the game here. And we got it. So the reason why that's difficult is it's the second fastest QTE in the game, and it moves across the screen, so it can kind of mess with your eyes and your timing perception. Nice little platforming skip coming up right here in a moment. We're going to go for another platforming skip right here. This one I am far less consistent with. Alright, that worked out pretty well. There's a few versions of that. Sometimes you can immediately activate the hook. Sometimes you can slide off of the geometry on the right and land right here. Sometimes you get what I got. In any case, that still saved a fair amount of time compared to sliding slowly across gaps. So now, we're going to have the final Chupacabra skip of the game. Alright, and we got it. It is possible to skip this door puzzle, however it doesn't really save that much time and only saves time on a first attempt. Besides that, requires a precise infinite jump, so we're just going to do the puzzle instead. Like, the time save is like 1 second or less, so...
Fueled by the very flames of hell.
We're coming up on Gravedigger. Gravedigger is another one of those bosses and another one of those skips where it really eluded me for quite some time how to do the skip correctly. It wasn't until I really dug deep inside of some of Bindlestick's video to find an interesting piece of information regarding the jump mechanics. If a platform is falling away that you're standing on and you are blocking, you are considered grounded as it is falling, and that allows you to do a ground launcher. This allows us to get better positioning for this skip. But first, I need to hope that I get it. So I activated my launcher just a little late there. I'd rather take this restart than some of the others. I'll explain that more in a little bit. So the timing, you can see, is pretty strict on this because the death collision is quite high here. Yeah, so there I didn't get a full backwards long jump. I kind of turned to the side, and because of that I didn't get the momentum I needed to hit this skip. So yeah, it's a combination of getting the launcher and then getting the correct angle with the correct speed to finish the skip. So a lot of things that kind of need to go right here. Whew, okay. I almost rolled off the invisible ledge there. But that is the Gravedigger skip. And hopefully you can kind of see why that was so difficult for me to do and to learn. The margin of error on not just launching, but also the angle at which you need to jump backwards is pretty punishing. Like, you have to be in the right position. But we're very quickly kind of getting to the end of the game here. We got 3 stages left, but among those 3 stages, we have the hardest overall stage in the game, which is Necromancer's Abyss. A lot of skips inside of it, a lot of situations where you can lose a lot of time if things don't go your way. So let's hope that they cooperate today. Okay, got the first skip. That's a puzzle skip where you're intended to use the contraption that I passed to create an eclipse in the structure behind me. There is a possible skip to this puzzle, but it requires an infinite jump string with a inconsistent setup. As I mentioned, some of the setups... Sorry, I'm trying to think about this. Two, 1, 2. Wait. Up, right, up, left, down, left, up. Yeah, okay. Whew. I thought I just made a really bad mistake. It's my fault. Should have known that I had it there, but... Second guessed myself because I actually messed that up recently in practice. It's okay though. Anyway, as I mentioned, in the PC version, the infinite jump mechanics seem modified from the console version. So as a result of that, I don't really feel confident going for this infinite jump. So we're pretty quickly going to be coming up to the actual difficult skip I was talking about, which is the Necromancer skip. The basic idea is we're going to come up to a gate. Behind that gate is going to be a portal. A boss is going to spawn. You are intended to defeat that boss, and by defeating that boss, a gate will activate in front of the... or a portal will activate in front of the gate. You're supposed to take that portal, run across the stage through that portal to activate a switch. That switch powers another portal. You then do the same thing for a second portal, which then opens up the gate and charges the teleporter behind it. We are going to attempt to not do any of that. What we're going to attempt to do is we're going to try to jump to the power source of the portal behind the gate, activate that, and then bypass the gate in order to continue on. In order to do that, we need to bypass this gate twice. For this first one, we need to get on top of the gate and then make a very, very structured jump blind onto a platform that we cannot possibly see. You just have to know that it exists in space. We are also hoping that the Necromancer does not crowd this jump point, otherwise we cannot get on top of the gate. Okay, that worked out perfectly. We even got in the center. So, if I was to get out of bounds on the border of that, it still would not work, because you can't get back in bounds from that spot. You have to land, like, in the middle of that platform, or you just can't do anything about it. One thing that I'm very glad didn't happen is the Necromancer can summon zombies. The first time he summons zombies, it cuts to a camera angle of him, messes up your inputs, and locks your inputs. When it locks your inputs, it gets rid of all the momentum you had built up trying to make the jump to the platform that I was getting at, and you basically just have to guess where you're supposed to go instead. There's not really a way that you can avoid that, other than attempting to let him cast zombies, but if you're trying to let him cast zombies, he could decide not to, and then you're just wasting time at that point. But that blind jump still gives me trouble to this day. Like, I know where it is in space, like spatially in the level, but just the number of things that you can fall off of, or the number of ways that your momentum can get changed, or the number of ways that your camera can get changed, all of these things contribute to making that a difficult skip. This Necromancer we do need to defeat. Alright, so the rest of the stage is mostly just going to be a little bit of platform skipping, removing cliff or ledge grabbing and crawling. I'd like to implore you guys, as mentioned before, to check out the next run, Castlevania Aria of Sorrow by VB. Or I think he's going by Vibuki now, but I know him as VB, so... But definitely check that out. Really, really good run. Really, really good runner as well. He will be doing a run in GDQ as well. In January, I believe, is when they're doing GDQ.
Yes, and you are correct that he is now going by Vibuki, or perhaps VBUki. I'm not entirely certain.
Maybe it's VBUKI. It's just all in there. I mean, we'll have to.
Although I
we'll
suppose
have to get
we'll
confirmation.
have to ask him himself.
We'll have to get confirmation on this. Alright. So let's see if I get this platforming skip here. This one's... and no luck. Sometimes you can jump up on top of that platform without having to grab there, but still haven't really cracked the code on what the game wants me to do there in order to let that happen. So we're coming to probably the skip that made me want to learn this speedrun. So we're coming up on the final Titan, Dracolich. The first time I fought Dracolich, it was probably a 12-minute fight. Even if you know what you're doing for Dracolich, it still takes about 6 minutes. If everything goes well, we will be completing him in less than a minute. You are intended to get on top of Dracolich as it flies around the stage, climbing all over its body, all over its bones, going from rib to rib, going backwards and forwards all over the enemy, until you finally reach ruin points that you then break and then rinse and repeat 4 or 5 times. We will not be doing any of that. Gabriel's kind of tired of climbing at this point. So, as I mentioned for the library, when you do that shadow charge, you get an inconsistent amount of forward momentum. We are trying to get a lot of forward momentum, if possible, for this particular one. Because as the camera is turning, see that little island in the background? That's where we want to go. If we can get to that island, we will hit a trigger point to push us forward in the stage. So it looks like we're going to miss out on the minute. But hopefully we don't take 6 minutes. There we go. So by going here, even though the boss's health gauge is really high right now, it's actually extremely small. It's counting us as if we were in the final stage of the fight for the purpose of its life bar. And so because of that, even though it has full health, just punching at its throat a few times and it's just gonna fall over and die. Alright, we're at the last stage.
And now the final...
We are going to be fighting the Satan. Not even kidding you. This isn't a joke. Or me. I'm not ribbing you at all. We are fighting the Satan. Lord of Darkness, Lucifer.
Reminder, boys and girls, that the Satan simply means the adversary. Impossible.
Alright. So we need to turn into the right polarity to pass through these rings. So another skip I have been not able to confirm in PC. It's possible to use a dark crystal as you grab him for these cutscenes to bypass these cutscenes. If that was possible in PC, it would save about 1 minute to 120 on each of the 2 cutscenes. However, as I mentioned, I have been unable to confirm it on PC, and I've tried pretty diligently for that one. That one I can get a fair bit more on console as well, so I feel like it might have just been removed or is prohibitively difficult with the frame rates you get on PC. Okay, so the end of the fight is not going to be upon expending its life gauge, but a QTE therein. I'll let you know as we get to it. As mentioned, you're supposed to hit his light charge with shadow magic, and his shadow magic with light charge.
I will wipe the name of Belmont from this world.
Alright.
Forever.
So he didn't do a move that I really didn't want to see, so that's nice. He can make landmines that eat tons of time if you have to deal with them. You kind of have to take the landmine. Another bit of randomness here. This pattern is different every time you see it. You just have to cope and figure it out. So be ready on time, but it'll be in a little bit. So basically, the Satan is going to be in the ground and Gabriel is going to kick him out of it right here. It's not going to be on that one, but on the QTE after that. So get ready. And... time.
GG. Rather far underestimate as well.
Yeah, the estimate is quite generous for this game, simply because, as I mentioned, the amount of inconsistencies and things that can go wrong are vast. So, I've had runs that have been at the 129 point, I think was the lowest I had for a marathon run. Or no, 131, I should say, is the lowest I've had for a marathon run. And I've gone as high as like 143. And that was in danger of going over estimate in a couple places.
Forgive me. Forgive me. My God.
So we can either watch the ending here, or if VB is ready, we could hop right into that, because I know we're a little behind schedule.
I will introduce you to such pleasures. Her soul will
We can let the ending play.
Sure.
once I have finished with you.
So I guess I could talk a little bit about the ending here. The mask that you've been collecting, its power isn't so much to have the exact power of God, but it's to be able to see through God's eyes. There's a couple of things you can infer from this ending. Before Lords of Shadow 2 completely destroyed the storyline and the Lords of Shadow Mirror of Fate, you could imply that he became Gabriel Belmont became Dracula here. It is implied that what happens to him here happened to the other Lords of Shadow, and that all of his good traits and soul went up to heaven and left his darker evil traits on Earth. That's not what happens, though, as we find out later, completely destroying any subtlety in the storyline whatsoever. What is of note, though, is the fact that Satan can apparently see through God's eyes, and he's still completely terrified of Gabriel and scared of him as he reaches the end of his fight. The implication there is that Gabriel is monstrous and, like, just this brutal killer that, like, no one could ever possibly think as being a good person or a monster. But that's just the vision, the omniscience showing that through. But it is through God's infinite mercy and wisdom that he's able to see that Gabriel is worthy of redemption. Since Satan does not have this, he still sees him as this irredeemable monster that terrifies him.
Given back what was wrongfully taken from you, to repent your sins, to make amends.
But without you,
You freed them all. You saved us all, my Gabriel.
I couldn't save you.
I knew I could not tell you, or despair would have eroded.
I only mention that because that's
would have been lost.
perhaps a plot intricacy that's somewhat missed,
Faith in
given what's happening in the end of the game.
Strong enough to free the world, and you did not let me down.
I am not worthy of your faith. Your love. I am nothing.
You are a good man, Gabriel. You are as God intended, fallible, yet capable of great things. I loved you then, as I love you now. I see before me a man who has regained God's favor, and who has my forgiveness, and the forgiveness of all the lost souls of this world. You have saved us all, and you have saved yourself. The mask is a powerful device. It allows us to see through God's eyes.
Can it really bring the dead back?
Yes. Look. too late for me, my love. I cannot come back.
No. No, don't go.
It is my time. The light is calling. I'm not
No.
afraid.
Please, stay. Stay with me.
It's beautiful, Gabriel. So beautiful. It's calling to me. Calling.
I love you, Maria. I love you. Forgive me.
Oh yeah, we didn't see her at all, pretty much. She's the person that it said it's impossible for us to climb up, so no fond farewell for her.
Impossible is nothing.
I made that face too when people thought Kojima had anything to do with this game, other than probably polish work. Shoutouts to Mercury Steam for making a game of this caliber with as much experience as they had. But if this looked at all interesting, there's not really too many resources for learning this game, but if you get in contact with me, I can do what I can to help you out. Okay, casual game. Fantastic speed game for the things that I love in speed gaming. Feel free to check it out. Often on sale on Steam and on console versions. I've been Turbodog702. Thank you very much for watching this run. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. And I'll see you guys on another time. Shout out to VB for me also.
Indeed. Please stay tuned for the next run of Castlevania Aria of Sorrow Glitchless Hard. We will be right back.